Under the Mistletoe is a really lovely film. It's not an easy watch because it's very heavy, very emotional. There are, of course, some lighter moments to keep it from being completely depressing, but it is a beautiful film. I will say I don't love the title. I almost never, ever talk about film titles. Maybe I should. Maybe that's something I should focus a little bit more on. But when I read the title, and then I read the description, I kind of thought it doesn't seem very fitting. So I don't know. I don't really ever talk about film titles. Might make that my New Year's resolution to just be a little bit more analytical about titles, good or bad. But other than that, it is a pretty wonderful film. This was released in 2006. It's directed by George Mendeluk, and it's written by Lindsay MacAdam and Jason Riley, and we have a cast including Jaime Newman, Michael Shanks, and Conan Graham. And quite early on at the start of the film, unfortunately, there's a car accident, and I'm getting emotional already. I'm trying to keep it together. There were at least 2 times in the film when I kind of lost it and just couldn't keep it together. I think I managed to make it about halfway through, and Tom loses his father. And of course, Susan loses her husband, and Tom can see his father. He can see his father's spirit, and his father's spirit isn't able to move on while Susan is holding on to so much hurt. And Susan keeps telling Tom his father's not there. He's not seeing him. Of course, he hasn't come back in spirit. And I think that that's very disgusting. I will say that. I didn't like her. That's the only thing about her I didn't like. But it's a very prominent part of what she has to do in this. And I feel like even if you don't believe, don't take that away from somebody else. Tom was clearly finding a lot of comfort in this. And to just say, no, you can't see your father, and then just ripping that comfort away from him, that's a bad parent. That's a very bad parent. So I kind of hated her, but not so much that I didn't want the best for her. I still wanted her to let go of the hurt and pain that she was holding on to, at least enough that she could kind of get through the day a little bit better. Maybe it was the anger and hurt that was causing her to be nasty to her son and rip away his comfort. Who knows? People grieve in different ways. But either way, it's not acceptable. It's not suitable. Don't ever do it. And unfortunately, she did. And that's you can see how frustrating this is for Tom. And there's this scene. It was so beautiful, and this is exactly how this situation should have been handled. They're in this shop. They're buying, I think they went in for candles, and Tom is talking to the woman who owns the shop, and ridiculously getting emotional again. And in fact, I think this might have been the time when I started to lose it for the first time. And she's talking about how she lost her husband a few years ago, and she talks about how he's still upstairs. His spirit is still around. And Tom's face visibly lights up at this because somebody understands. Somebody understands the experience that he's having with his father, and his mother was constantly just cutting through it, saying, no, this isn't right, you can't see your father. And I thought, what a horrible, nasty person. Just because you're incapable of thinking beyond the bubble that is your own reality, think about somebody else's reality and what things mean to them, and just how much this is affecting Tom. And the woman, she was absolutely fantastic, and it was so beautiful, but the facial expressions on Tom were just back and forth, so happy that this woman could understand him, and then so disheartened and hurt that his mother was ripping away the very thing that was carrying him through the days. Needless to say, I think Susan is a horrible person. Again, one could argue that it's her grief talking and that she doesn't want her son to be in denial, but it's not in denial. She's not allowing her son to grieve in the way that's effective for him. And if seeing his father's spirit, whether it's real or imagined, helps him get through this, who cares? So Susan's not a very nice person. And despite that, Tom still wants to help her. And I'll say no more than that. I don't want to give away any more than that. It is a beautiful film because of Tom, because of that woman in the shop, because of what his father brings to it. Susan is an example, a prime example of how not to talk to somebody who is grieving. It's like she almost forgot that her son had lost a father, and she was so wrapped up in her own grief. And she needs, as a mother, as that boy's mother, as Tom's mother, she needs to be aware of his needs. And unfortunately, she was not meeting his needs. She was ripping away his needs. his needs being the comfort of his father's spirit to help him through this difficult time. So needless to say, I don't like Susan, but I still wanted the best for her because it would have been the best for everybody. And it is quite frustrating in that regard, but I think it does stand as a prime example of how not to behave and how not to treat somebody. It is so disrespectful. If somebody has a belief and you tell them their belief is wrong, especially when it's a religious belief, if you have a faith belief and you say you're wrong, that's disrespectful. Why would that person be wrong? Why are you right? Why is Susan always right about everything? Again, it could be down to her grief, but I still think that grieving doesn't necessarily give you a free pass to be nasty and take away the thing that's helping somebody else through their grief. So there are some examples of how not to behave in this kind of situation. And then from characters like Tom, we see examples of how to behave. That's not to say everything Tom does is perfect. He's not a character without flaw. That would be a very boring film if he was completely flawless, but he is definitely a bright light in this film, and I think there are some gorgeous messages. And thankfully, because Tom can see his father and can feel that comfort, I think anybody going through something similar, anybody who's dealing with grief can hopefully, as long as their beliefs align with this, they will hopefully find some comfort from this as well. So Under the Mistletoe, I don't like the title. It obviously refers to a kind of romantic aspect that I don't mind. Honestly, I feel like as well the romantic aspect kind of should have taken more of a back seat. I would have preferred it if the film was just about learning to accept what had happened and not moving on, because it's not necessarily a case of moving on from grief, but learning to deal with it in a way that allows you to continue living your life. So there are things about this that I think could have been done better. But in general, all of that being said, because the good moments are so fantastic, it is still a really great film. And I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's a very difficult watch. I will get to the end of this without completely breaking down. It affected me a lot. It was a very emotional experience. And needless to say, if it sounds like a story that might appeal to you, then I'd say Under the Mistletoe is definitely worth watching.